Have you seen the news lately? Daily news filled with stories about war, crimes, pollution, inequality, drug abuse, oppression, and even a cancel culture these days.
I don't know about you guys, but it's been pretty gloomy over the media lately.
We live in a media saturated world. The continuous flow of images and information from the media, such as digital media like social media platforms, news website, and more, that feeds our understanding of the world around us and its residents. By its nature, such platforms is not a truth medium, it is an information medium. Hence, it may be challenging to thread through true and false information.
From passive consumers to critical consumers and prosumers, we are active end users of mass media. In his book, In Understanding Media Theory, Kelvin Williams shared that many have seen the medium as a tool of influence used by agents who seek to control a narrative. But is that true? Consider we've never thought of media as anything else but informing us about what is happening in the world. Of course, the media is meant to act objectively as possible, but why do consumers of information think otherwise? Do we blame media for society's ills? Is this the assumed belief of the end users? Does media cover chaos? Is this a self-evident truth or a false belief?
Before we start unpacking this fascinating topic, I ran a small survey with the help of my friends from Singapore, the UK, South Africa, and Switzerland to gauge common belief around media, its role and influence. These are the sample size that we see here. I chose to ask the cohort what they thought about the question, does the media cover chaos? And here's what some of them had to say.
A majority of the respondents agreed that media covers chaos. But to understand this belief, let's try to understand media, its purpose, and the different forms chaos comes in. Some of the examples can be seen in these headlines here. Chaos, the most convenient and effective word to use in a headline to capture a reader's attention when describing about a situation in which there is something unexpected to report. Chaos does also include the social discord and attitudes people form towards each other. Consider how the media portray the world, and what is happening is often controversial, exaggerated, and usually a matter of dispute. Individuals, groups, and peoples regularly complain about how they are portrayed in media. We see the implications of this action almost whenever we access social media. Stuart Hall, a cultural theorist and sociologist, argues that the media does not reflect reality, but rather defines reality. He further describes the media as being a part of politics of significance in that they are involved in giving meaning to events that happen in the world around them. But how is the media defining this reality? Are human beings unknowingly the instrument of influence for the chaos that the media portrays? The data scientist Caleb Litteroux applied sentiment mining to every article published in the New York Times between 1945 and 2005, an archive of translated articles and broadcasts from 130 countries between 1979 and 2010. He assessed the emotional tone by tallying the number of contexts of words with positive and negative connotations, such as good, nice, terrible, and horrific. From his analysis, Litteroux concludes that the news has become more negative over time and is real. The New York Times got steadily more morose from the 1960s to the 1970s, lightened up a bit in the 1980s and 1990s, and sank steadily into a progressively worse mood in the first decade of the century. Yet, the subscription to well-known news agencies and periodicals increased steadily over the years. The media have understood that if it bleeds, it leads. Media scholars who tally news stories of different kinds of editors with a menu of possible stories, see which they pick and how they display them, have confirmed that the gatekeepers prefer negative to positive coverage. You must wonder why the media is filled with disaster, corruption, and incompetence. Psychologist Tom Safford proposed that it may be because we are unwittingly drawn to depressing stories. Hence, what might this depressing slant say about us as audiences? Many people often say that they would prefer good news, but yet, is it true? What if I were to propose that human beings shows an affinity to chaos and that the media is responsible for perpetuating that need? An experiment conducted by researchers Mark Trussler and Stuart Soroka from the McGill University of Canada invited participants to their lab for a study of eye tracking. The volunteers were asked to select some stories about politics to read from a news website so that a camera could make some baseline eye tracking measures. It was important that they were told that they actually read the articles so that the right measurement could be prepared. The results of the experiment and stories that those who read most was somewhat surprising yet depressing. Participants often chose stories with a negative tone, corruption, setbacks, hypocrisy, and so on, rather than a neutral and positive story. People who were more interested in current affairs and politics were particularly likely to choose the bad news. And yet, when asked, these people said they preferred good news. Ironically, on average, they said that the media were too focused on negative stories, yet it was more likely news they preferred to read. The researchers presented their findings as evidence of negativity bias, psychologists' term for our collective hunger to hear and remember bad news. As you'd expect from this theory, there's some evidence that people respond quicker to negative words. In a lab experiment, flash words like cancer, bomb, or war are being responded to quickly as opposed to words like baby, smile, or fun. We can also recognize negative words faster than positive words and even tell that a word is going to be unpleasant before we can tell exactly what the word is going to be. So our attraction to bad news may be more complex than just journalistic cynicism or a hunger springing from the darkness within. Similarly, a social experiment conducted by a Russian news site, the City Reporter, only reported good news to its readers for an entire day. The site brought positive news stories to the front of its pages and found all the silver linings in a negative story. Yet, according to one of the editors on Facebook, they lost 2/3 of its normal readership that day. The City Reporter's experiment is an indication that our fascination with negativity may be more pervasive than we thought. On the other hand, the optimists might argue that the media outlets skew negative because bad news is important and spreading it can affect positive change. Reporting on natural disasters, for example, can prompt action on environmental issues. Likewise, writing about centuries of institutionalized racism, corrupt government officials, and ineffective social policy can hopefully bring about incremental positive change. It's not about rating or page views. Those optimists would argue it's about making the world a better place. As an educator, I am exploring different possibilities of how the media interacts with the nature of cognition in children. The media has the power to determine, shape, and change the behavior of individuals. Introducing media literacy early in a child's learning development reinforces critical thinking and inquiry necessary to separate facts from information. I shall end this session by reiterating that we started off with the assumed belief that mass-mediated news covers chaos, which is true, but an alternative belief would be that human nature shows an affinity to chaos and media only perpetuates this need. Thank you.